Comic book and manga fans, this is H.H. German from Sigma Comics, and today we have a video asking you which one of these devices do you have, and what are these devices? These are retro handheld consoles. Okay, these things are the rage, and pretty soon, if you don't have one already, you're going to have one real soon, and I'm going to tell you why in this great video. All right, before we get started, let's tell you who we are and what we do, and then we're going to jump right into why you need to get one of these things if you don't already have one already. We are Sigma Comics, dedicated to fighting animal abuse through comics, with our character, the Calico, who beats the living you-know-what out of people who abuse and kill animals. Why? Because we are justice for all, and we're fighting animal abuse through comics and manga. You're looking at our website, sigmacomics.com, where you can get all manner of stuff Calico related. You're looking at our Calico comic books, graphic novels, and digital versions there. This is our comic book series available for ordering at sigmacomics.com. Our trade paperback, which is the first full run of Calico Street Math, our very first trade, collected in this beautiful, gorgeous volume, 240 pages of full color Calico action, rated M for mature. This is not for the young kiddies. This is rated 17 and up. And we have, of course, the collector's edition. We have a manga tankobon format as well. Absolutely gorgeous. Great prices. 800 pages, folks, for the set. Absolutely gorgeous stuff. Every penny goes to fighting animal abuse. We have merch as well, featuring the Calico with the I Kill for Animals shirt. And let's jump into the video. Again, asking a question. Which one of these do you have? If you don't already have them, let's go into the what, how, and why. What are these things? Folks, these are the R36. R is in Robert, 36S is in Sam. R36S handheld device. That's the one on top in the vertical format. The one in the horizontal version is the R36H. I have both of these units, both of these models, and folks, they're available for less than $100 each. I'll go even further. The top one is available for less than $50. You can get that thing for like 30 or $40 on Amazon right now. You go on Amazon and you type in R36S, and if you're more of a vertical Game Boy type, you can get that. These things are absolutely amazing. In some cases, they have up to 20,000 games on them, and not just any games. Games from the leading video game publishers: Nintendo, Sega, PlayStation, Switch, N64, etc., etc., etc. Folks, this is absolutely crazy stuff. The one on the bottom is called the R36H, and it's also available at Amazon. That one's a little more expensive. I think I got this one for 60 or $70. And that one has more games. That one has up to 20,000. I think the first one, the S version, was only up to about 5 or 6,000. But that's the what. Let's tell you how. How are these things even possible? What's going on here? The how, it's emulation, folks. Emulation, you can emulate games from your favorite consoles from back in the day and get them on these things, on these little devices. And I'm talking any game you played back in the 80s, 90s, and even early 2000s in some cases. All right, emulation, without getting too technical, I'm not the tech wizard, but basically you can mirror the software of a game, okay, to play on any computer. All right, and that's really where this all started. You have these things called ROMs, and they are the mirrors, the acting mirrors of these software components from the games. And if you have a computer, you can make it all work and program correctly to have it work on a computer. Given that now the computer capability has been implemented in handheld size, i.e. cell phones. I mean, that's really what cell phones are. They're basically little computers now at this point. Well, if now you can have them, because you have handheld device capability with computers, now you can have this. You can have the power of a computer in your hand, and hence you can have these little ROMs, these little emulators playing on these devices. And now, as a subsequent and subset of this, because you have the miniaturization of data, Okay, you can now, you remember back in the day, you had to have these big SCSI drives for memory. Okay, these big fat tape cartridge things that had like 100 megs in them. That's how we used to do it in the ad agencies. Well, that's gone. You have these little thing called flash drives, these little USB mini drives here, the micro drives. They are absolutely tiny, and they, in some cases, you can put 100 what is it, 250 gigs on a little thing like this. Of course, it's going to fit on those devices. So not only do you have the computer device capability, now you have the little software memory storage that can have, in some cases, 250 gigs or even more, probably 512. I don't even know gigs. But you don't really need that much, folks, because the games back then that Nintendo made, especially those 8-bit games, you only needed to put 16 megs on those games. All right. Now you've got again 128 gigs, and that's just on one little flash card. You can put two of those things in there. You could be walking around with 512 gigs on these little devices. It's insane. The computer doesn't even have. My computer at home doesn't even have that. Okay. The laptop that I have right now that I'm talking to you on, which is a latest model from Dell, I think it's got like 128 or I don't know 256 gigs or something on the thing. I think it's 256 gigs, but it's more than enough for what I need, folks. This is absolutely amazing stuff. That is the how. The why. Why on earth would an adult like me need one of these things? Well, folks, I tell you what. I'm going to tell you, as an Android phone user, I get these prompts once a year, and they tell me how active I've been in terms of traveling. And let me just give you an example. 2022, which was the first year that Sigma Comics was active on the convention circuit, I flew to 45 different cities, and these shows happen every weekend. All right, the convention is typically Friday to Sunday. All right, and so think about that: 45 cities, 45 shows. How many years? How many weeks in a year? 52. Okay, in 2022, I flew 45 out of 52 weekends out of the year. Okay, you know what that means? That means that you're going to have a lot of downtime. When you're traveling to the shows, you're in the back of an Uber, you're at the airport, you're waiting for your flight at the gate. Sometimes they get canceled. Okay, obviously you're on the plane. And guess what you can't do there unless you tap into the Wi-Fi there on the planes, which I never like to do for security purposes. Uh, you're going to sit, okay? And I'm not going to put those things in my ears. I don't like to watch those things in those movies on the planes. I like to tinker with my phone, okay? And I would say 90% of the time, certainly up until now, I spent my downtime writing. Okay, I write on my phone. Okay, all those calico comic books and manga that you're reading from H.H. German, a lot of times I write them on the planes because I have very little time. I'm an extremely busy person. If you haven't noticed it from my accent, I am a New Yorker. And there is a stereotype about us New Yorkers. We are extremely busy people. All right. A New York minute, you can get a lot done. All right. In a New York minute. That's another expression. So, when you find yourself with a bunch of time now, and you can't tap into the internet, or you don't want to tap into a Wi-Fi, and your writing tasks are done for the day or for the weekend, and I don't need to write. Well, I was as a somebody who grew up in the 80s. I'm a Gen Xer, and I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I grew up. I saw, frankly, the birth and advent of video games. I mean, not the birth, but certainly the advent of video games, because I think they were back in the 70s, and I certainly wasn't, engaged in video games in the 70s. I was an infant or very young, but certainly in the 80s. And I saw the rise of video games, okay? Atari, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I grew up in that culture. That's part of my upbringing. And I love retro games, okay? Games from back in the day. And the truth is that if I had some downtime, which I was certainly having even in the first year, 2022, and I wasn't writing all the time, I would download a game on my phone from the Play Store. Okay, I'm not one of these people that carry all the consoles and things like that. I think the last console I owned was a Sony PlayStation. In fact, I know for a fact it was the very first one, PSX1, the first version. I have a younger brother, Bobby, and he's 10 years younger than me. He's a millennial, and he has an Xbox. So it's a couple of different generations, and he kept on collecting those later on, in more later. But my last console was a Sony PlayStation. That was it. I mean, I entered the workforce, and by that time I was already busy with work and stuff. But listen, I was downloading the games on the phone, but they weren't your top-notch games. The games that you were getting down from the Play Store were not from Nintendo, were not from Sega. They were from little independent creators that there was some of them were fun and they were good time killers and whatnot. But when I learned about these emulators, I said, "Holy crap! Are you serious? I could actually have one of these in my pocket, and I could have 20,000 games, and not just any games like you're getting at the Play Store. I'm talking about things like games like Resident Evil, folks. Resident Evil from PlayStation. I bought the PlayStation for that game. I love that game. Folks, I just finished solving Resident Evil, the director's cut, the very first one. Absolutely incredible time I had. I finally had some time. Just got back from MegaCon. We killed it there. We did a great job. All my writing is done. I just finished writing the manga for Green Eye Bandito Volume 1. Had a great time writing it. It'll be out soon. Book 2 for Here Comes Calico. Calico trade, our second trade is complete. My writing duties on it. Totally complete. So I said, you know what? Let me treat myself to one of these gaming systems. They're only $30. I got it from Amazon. Arrived in a couple of days. And I solved Resident Evil on this thing. Are you kidding me? You know how much it would have cost me to buy all these things to do that? Into the hundreds, easily. Folks, I got 20,000 games on these things. I mean, crazy things like Uncle Fester's Quest from Nintendo, which was a game that I started playing. I remember fondly back in the day, and I had to bring it back to the, what do you call it? To the Blockbuster video. I would rent the games, and sometimes they just didn't have a chance to play because we were out actually playing out in the street in the Bronx. Got back to playing that one. I got it to the third level, way farther than I did as a kid. These are all childhood memories, and again, downtime. When you have some time to play these things, you could do them. But not just that. You have games from Sega Master System. Okay, Super Nintendo, Mike Tyson's Punch Out, every game you can think of is on these things. And I'm talking even later games like games from what do you call this? Nintendo 64, games that I never even played before on there. The remakes of Resident Evil I mean, absolutely beautiful, full color, gorgeous graphics, absolutely amazing stuff. And you say, well, that's just one part of the why. Why are you going to get this? Well, the downtime. Doesn't matter what age you have. Nostalgia, in my case, nostalgia and downtime. But listen, there are other reasons for why. How about opportunity? There's a demand. You're not going to have these things being created en masse if there isn't demand, if there isn't need. I just mentioned one component of need for myself as a Gen Xer who looks at having something retro and nostalgic. But there's also another huge piece of the pie, which is bad creative. Okay, the video game industry globally is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's a huge, massive industry. Okay, and what you've seen over the past few years, you started to see it, I would say, in the late 20 teens and into the early 2000s, and not just in video games, but all across pop culture, a decline in quality in pop culture. Okay, I saw it in comic books back in 2000, which is why I decided to enter the space. I should say, decided to enter the space. The quality of the comics they weren't there. It's not just a distribution problem; it's a quality problem, and you see it in movies, in streaming, in comics, any pop culture genre, all right, medium, you're seeing a quality control issue. All right, it's just bad stuff being put out there. All right, you remember in the 80s and 90s, you had incredible seminal runs of comics. When was the last seminal run of a comic book? I'm talking about a seminal run, not just a good series. Ah, that was good. I'm talking about great stuff. You know, I think was great. I think Walking Dead was pretty great. I do. I think Kirkman, yeah, Kirkman, Robert Kirkman did a great job on that series. It was a great concept. Wasn't unique by any means, but he did something unique with it. He had his own spin on zombies, and I think he invested a good amount of time. He really sat with that idea, okay, and gave it texture. Gave it he kept putting clay in front of him. Okay, as he was molding, he was also putting more clay on the thing. Okay, and he kept working on that clay. And I really think that he got himself a good team, and all of them were having a great time with that thing. And I really think that's really the last thing that I saw in terms of comics that that was really just a seminal, really good, solid hit. He got a lot of wood on that ball. Okay, and he got his hips into that thing and drove it. All right, but what was that? 20 years ago? It was 20 years ago. Yeah, The Walking Dead, 20 years ago, folks. Believe it. In fact, I think it was over 20 years ago. Okay, so you're talking about a generation ago. A full generation has passed and has gone and come and gone from the last really, truly seminal comic book series. And where did it come? In the indies, not in the big two. Now, how about in the big two? When was the last time you saw a seminal series from that? I can't even think of it. It has to go back to the 90s. Goes back to the 90s the last time I can think of one. And by that time, I was already out of comics. All right. So that's where we are, folks. If you look at all those big movies that you see, oh, yeah, the superhero movies, $1 billion, this and that. Folks, all those stories are from, forget about decades ago, generations ago. In some cases, 2 generations ago. These are all storylines from the 80s. Every single one of those storylines that you're seeing in the comics, in the movies, excuse me, those aren't from today's creators. The creators that are working on at Marvel and DC today, oh no, my friends. Oh no. Folks, there is a massive, and I mean gargantuan quality control, quality issue in comics today. Okay, you take a comic from the 80s, like even your average run-of-the-mill comic story from the 80s, compare that to today, it's night and day. And it's striking. It really is. Again, who am I to come into an industry that's goes back almost 100 years to come in and lay a claim and put a flag down? What audacity do I have? I'll tell you what audacity. When I walked into a comic book shop 5 years ago and I said, this is what a comic book is today? And it's how much? $5 for this crappy story? Who's writing these comics? And then you go deeper. You decide to go deeper and deeper in the to try to in the hole there, to try to the rabbit hole. You try to figure out how this is possible. Well, we got to start a comic book publisher now, but let's do it with a great cause behind it. And that's what started Sigma Comics. People who loved animals, okay, who decided, you know what, there's an opportunity in comics. Why not do something we love, which is comics, try to save the damn thing, okay, because it's been so poorly handled by today's, comic book creators and the big two, frankly, the management teams there. And at the same time, do something wonderful, because, it's a wonderful thing to be able to generate income towards a cause that we are all very, very passionate about, and that's what we did. But again, getting back to the why, there was a need, demand. There's people, a lot of us out there really respect quality fiction, really good movies. And again, I just limited it to comics. All right, when was the last seminal movie series? Okay, it was like every other day a great movie was coming out in the 80s and 90s. Okay, A movie like any any movie, just pull any movie out of your cap right now. The Shining. All right, classic. When was the last classic in the movie theaters? There were tons of people in the movie theaters every single weekend. Every single weekend, the box office was a big draw. Nowadays, maybe once every other year, you have a big hit. That's why people are doing streaming. All right, at least the production is, you have more. Content is sort of like content is sort of like pitches. Okay, you're gonna get a few of them. The more expensive it is, the harder it is to really get everything right. Right? You're not gonna have every other movie be a hit. In streaming, if you have a lower budget, you have more opportunity to get more pitches. Yeah, more pitches to hit is what I'm trying to say. Okay, not everybody's walking around with a few $100 million to create movies, but a lot more people have maybe a couple million here and there. A lot more people have that, especially here in the U.S. Okay, so you have more pitches, more opportunities. All right, and every now and then you get some wood behind that ball, and you got some people with some nice flexible hips and good drive, and they can crack a home run. All right, but what I'm saying is that those batters right now, they need some serious batting practice, and I mean across comics, movies, streaming, video games, and that's where we're talking now is video games, folks. AAA games, which are referred to as the big video games that have huge budgets, okay, they are suffering from a quality control issues, and we can go. There's layers of that problem. I don't want to go into the DEI stuff and why the reasons, but there is most certainly a quality control issue in video games today. Because if you are saying that you've got companies out there that are devoting, and I'm not even joking right now, there are companies that devote hundreds of millions of dollars into a video game to turn around and watch that thing flop like a pancake, okay, in a 2 a.m. diner, all right, in Queens. No offense to the Queens guys out there or gals, but everybody knows the best diners are on Long Island, but Staten Island. But anyway, folks, bad games. Bad games to the point where people aren't buying them. Kids aren't buying these games. They're turning their backs on $100 million production video games with no problem, not even blinking an eye. And you know what they're going for? They're going into their older brothers or older sisters' PlayStation 2, believe it, Dreamcast, Sega Saturn, Super Nintendo. They're playing the games. If that wasn't the case, you wouldn't have these companies try to get these retro games out like Nintendo is trying to do. And of course, the emulators have taken off. And that's why they've taken off. First on the computers, and now because you can get them on these devices, kids are buying these things left and right. Adults are buying them too. Again, I bought both of these units that you're seeing here, the the R36S and the R36H. I have both of these units that you're seeing here. Okay, I'm going to give away the top one there to a friend of mine. But the bottom one is the one I use. That one has more games because I prefer the horizontal format. It's easier. I have very big hands. And, it's a funny story here. I knew I had big hands from boxing because Ringside, which is a boxing manufacturer, they have, the standard glove sizes, and I could never get into those damn things. And of course, when I ordered gloves on Amazon, winter gloves, I ordered the larges, and I still can't fit into those damn things. I have to get extra larges. And then with these, I bought the first one on top, and I was like, oh man, I can't play this. My hands were hurting after a few minutes. So the horizontal format works much better for me. But listen, people have their preferences, and you can get whichever one model you want. And you have the opportunity to get these things, and they're super cheap. They're only $30. The top one I think I only paid $35 for. The bottom one was a bit more expensive. I think I bought it for $65. But you can get them both on Amazon. Okay, the top one again is the R36S R36S, and the bottom one, the horizontal one, is the R36H. Folks, there's a need. Okay, these kids are not impressed with these games. They're finding better quality in the games that were coming out from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Okay, because you had much more creativity. There was quality control. Just a little, I'm gonna a little rant on the quality control issue, folks. I started seeing this in the mid 2000s. I think it was the late 2000s, like 2008, 2009, and into the early 20 teens. I started seeing typos everywhere in like news sites. I read the news on my phone, Google News and whatnot. How is this possible? Everywhere, typo here, typo there. I say, how the hell? You would have been fired immediately for something like this. And back in the 80s and 90s, certainly. And that's because we read our news in newspapers back in the day. Yep, believe it or not, there were these things called newspapers they were printed on newsprint, very thin paper, it was grayish, and you print this thing. If there was a typo on that, guess what? They would have to run a different edition. That's what they would do. The editors would do that, absolutely. And guess whose job got gone? Yours, if you did a typo. Nowadays, because everything's on the internet, everything's digital, I guess they're keeping these people. And those people are creating more and more typos. This is this meme generation that we have. And, I'm sorry to say this. Meme, M-E-M-E, if you don't know what a meme is, if you're an older person. But a meme is a product of today's generation, where the kids even speak in memes these days. It's like you don't even get a full sentence. I don't want to pick on the generation, but from a factual, scientific perspective, that generation is behind the comics today, behind the stories and all these things. The quality control isn't there, and it's not entirely their fault. Absolutely not. The editors that are responsible, that are tasked with putting out this content, really should be the one to blame. I think there's most certainly a quality control issue. There isn't enough time dedicated to cultivating the craft, and it's a very important thing. Ideas don't just sprout, instantaneously. I mean, they can, but what these people sometimes don't credit is the environment that they have had to sprout those ideas. Okay, when you are surrounding yourself with things that stimulate your creativity, there's an excellent chance you're going to come up with some good ideas. That's why people flock to the city, New York City especially. But there's a lot of exchange of ideas, a lot of energy, a lot of creative energy in the cities, especially in the downtowns and further lower. You get that. It most certainly was always the case here in New York. Okay, that energy is moving into Brooklyn and has been for the past couple of decades. All right, what used to be the Lower East Side is now in Brooklyn. Okay, so the bottom line is you really need to cultivate creativity, because we've always been a society of cultivating great stories, great ideas, and you really saw it up until relatively recently. And this is what happens when corporations move in. Comics was always counterculture. All right. It was almost frowned upon to read comics back in the the 70s and 80s, and even to a lesser extent in the 90s. But it became more mainstream. Comics did in the 90s. But what happened when it became more mainstream? The corporations moved in. Okay, Time Warner, Disney, etc. All those people moved in. And once you have suits behind something that's supposed to be cool and creative, let me tell you something, to you guys out there especially. I don't care how cool you think you are with the hot car, or how smart you are, or this and that. Cool isn't something, you could work on being cool, but in some cases you either have it or you don't. And it's not about what you have. It's about, your way about things. Being cool, you can't buy your way into being cool. You could try to, and I'm sure it works for some people. And once it does start working, then we're really screwed, because it's so tacky and crappy. Cool is when it comes from the essence, all right, from the being. You exude coolness, okay? Now, there are things that can, complement and serve as accessories to being cool. Absolutely. You know, the way you wear your hat, the way it's not even the hat, it's the way you wear it. You know, it's how you move, your gait, etc., etc. That's what comics was. Comics was super cool. And all those cool characters, innovative, creative, revolutionary. All right. When was the last time we had a Wolverine? All right. Wolverine was created in the late 70s. It was late 70s or early 80s. I'm not mistaken. Len Wein was part of that team, that creative team. He was the writer. I know there were other people on that. I'm forgetting the one of the artists there. There are a couple of them. Was it Milgram? No, I don't know. I know Herb Trimpe was part of that team there. He was there early on. But anyway, the bottom line is there's a need because stuff sucks today. There, I said it. There's a lot of crappy stuff out there, folks. Even when you spend a lot of money, hundreds of dollars, you still can't count on good creative, and that's why you have this device. There's a need. Okay, and finally, safety. All right, these days, you know, I remember playing a game called Diablo back when I graduated from college, and you know, back then you had intranets at any creative company. I don't care if you were a graphic design firm, ad agency, which is what I worked at. You know, you had games like Doom that were on the network, and if you had a lunch break, you could play with your other creative people, the art director, playing with copywriters, etc. It was a fun time, and I think Diablo was one of them that I saw on there, and I tinkered with it, but I never really got into it. Years later, when I went to start, you know, we had the pandemic, and everybody had downtime prior to me starting Sigma Comics. You know, I saw a website called GOG on there, and where you can download games for like, you know, $5-10 or something like that. Look at this Diablo. So I played it and I solved it. I got really into it because I'm a big fan of historical fiction. And I saw Diablo 2 on there, and I clicked on that. I said, oh, let me download this one for like $10, whatever it was. I played that and I said, wow, this is the best game I've ever seen in my life. I really enjoyed Diablo 2, and to this day, I think it is the best game I've ever played ever. It's so well thought out, conceived, especially for the replay value. But I started seeing things saying online and offline. I only ever played offline. I never saw the draw in joining up to play with other people. I know I was doing that on an intranet level with the Doom games when I was graduating school, because it was on there. But I was never driven to play because there were other people on there. I always wanted to have my own experience, especially historical fiction. And it turns out these days, with the advent of playing online, I noticed this actually with Bobby, my younger brother, who's a millennial. I mentioned him earlier. He had a gaming system, the Xbox, and he played Call of Duty, and he could play online with other people. And he loved doing that. I just never got into that. Then again, I'm a Gen Xer. He's a millennial. I preferred the personal experience in the story mode and all these things. But a lot of people play this way, especially this generation. And with that comes people. You know, you're playing with other people. And once you have people in anything, especially if you're going to have bad apples, especially when you have, you know, younger, you know, generation, you know, kids are obviously the most mature. You're going to have bullying, harassing, doxing, all sorts of crazy things that you have now. And more, you know, parents are saying, you know, you could play the game, but you're not going to play it online. Well, here's a way you can play offline 100% without having any problems, because these things are offline. Now you have them now. They're coming out with Wi-Fi capability, so I'm sure you'll be able to, you know, eventually play them, or if not now, you can play them. But the majority of these devices it's just for offline use. Okay, at least that's the main usage now. But that's a very attractive thing for a parent to, you know, fork over $30, and the kid has 20,000 games on this thing. Okay, and they don't have to worry about, you know, bullying with the video game systems that they have, which are in the hundreds of dollars, these systems anyway, and the games are also very expensive. $30-40, you get yourself one of these kids, your kid's happy. So you have demand all around, folks. You have just downtime if you're at an airport, like what attracted me to these things. You have bad creative, you know, from the big publishers now, Sony, you know, PlayStation 5s and Xboxes, whatever's they're on. and safety issues. There's lots of reasons why these things are becoming a attractive alternative. All right, so it's a huge audience, a growing audience of people that want nostalgia like I did and have downtime like I did, that are fed up. They're existing gamers. Okay, they're probably a bit younger or maybe older gamers that are currently playing now that are just fed up with the quality, and they're turning to these things. Okay, and safety. There it is in a nutshell. That's why you want to get one of these things. They're fun, they're safe, and they're super super cheap. 30, 40 bucks. You're out the door playing with this thing. And listen, we cover not just comics here, but anything related to pop culture, and that's why we're telling you about it. I had a great experience with this pop culture device, and you should too. And that's it for now. I hope you enjoy these. Again, you can get either of these units on Amazon for really cheap. But before you get those, get our comics available at sigmacomics.com. You're going to love them. Why? Because every penny goes to fighting animal abuse, and you are going to love it. Help us in our fight against animal abuse. Join our fight today at sigmacomics.com. And remember, keep on fighting for animals.